Welcome back now. Reaction from the other side of the aisle. I want to bring in Republican Congressman from Texas, John Ratcliffe. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee as well as the House Homeland Security Committee, where he chairs the subcommittee on cybersecurity. He's also a former federal prosecutor. Congressman, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us this morning.
You bet. Good morning, Maria.
First up, you just heard Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Your reaction to the special counsel, in a very rare move, coming out and refuting that BuzzFeed report, which was all in the headlines, top headlines, and on all the news last week, that the president had directed Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, to lie for him to Congress.
Well, I'm glad the special counsel did it. It was the right thing to do. He deserves credit for that. I think the president gave him credit for that. I guess the question that I would have, Maria, is why now, almost 2 years into the special counsel's tenure, does he take this extraordinary action to correct a fake news or false news article about the special counsel when there have been dozens of them over the last 2 years? So is that just a coincidence, or does it have something to do with the fact that that happened 2 days after an attorney general nominee said, for the first time, I'm going to grade the special counsel's homework, and I'm going to get to the bottom of all of this and bring a fair and expeditious conclusion to this matter. So I don't think it's as much of a coincidence as it is a cause and effect of what happened earlier in the week at the Attorney General's confirmation hearing.
I want to get back to Bill Barr's confirmation hearings and get your take on the timing, when he might be confirmed. First week in February, I think, is what we talked about. But let me get your take on this, because you never bought into that story that BuzzFeed reported, right? You never believed that the president asked Michael Cohen to lie.
No. Listen, if there was a conspiracy with the President of the United States to lie to Congress, that's the first thing Michael Cohen would have led with months ago, and it's the first thing the special counsel would have included. Michael Cohen wouldn't have pled to lying to Congress. He would have led to a conspiracy to lie to Congress that involved the president. So I never for a second thought there was anything to that BuzzFeed story, and I'm glad the special counsel corrected the record. So
the fact that is now we're learning him say, oh, I was directed by the president, after he's already been sentenced. He's going to go to jail for lying to Congress. Okay, let me move on, because we did also get some revelations from Bruce Ohr's closed-door interview with you and your colleagues, transcribed interview with congressional investigators. And I want to talk about that because it really does put a spotlight on something, whereas the people on the left and your detractors, in terms of saying this is nonsense, Jim Comey continues to call all of this nonsense. You just we had Jim Himes on last week, one of your colleagues in the Intel Committee, and I talked about FISA abuse with the Democratic congressman. Listen to what he said. We know that there was real FISA abuse, where the FBI did not tell the FISA judge who paid for the dossier that it was a political document, etc. Are you going to pursue that? Are you going to seek the truth there?
Maria, that's not accurate, and I've looked at every single one of the FISA affidavits that the Justice Department in any way misled the judge. I understand that that's a Republican talking point, but that's...
Congressman, your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that Jim Himes probably wishes he'd waited a week to come on your show, because, as you said, Maria, Bruce Ohr, parts of his testimony became publicly available this week. And he said just the opposite of what Jim Himes told you. Bruce Ohr raised his right hand and, under penalty of perjury, said what the FBI and the Department of Justice knew and when they knew it about Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier. And again, it was the opposite of what Jim Himes said last week. And it was the opposite of what Adam Schiff put in a memo that he released to the American public last year on that subject. But then again, those of us on Capitol Hill know that when Adam Schiff and the Truth have always had a very strained relationship and haven't always gotten along very well.
Well, you know, Adam Schiff was out talking about, you know, him seeking the truth in other areas, but nothing about this. Let's go through these transcripts, because you say to Bruce Ohr, okay, so again, so the record is clear. What the Department of Justice and the FBI were aware of prior to the first FISA application was your relationship with Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, your wife's relationship with Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, Mr. Steele's bias against Donald Trump, Mr. Simpson's bias against Donald Trump, your wife's compensation for work, Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS correct? And then he answers you. So his lawyer gets involved and says, "Can I have a second?" Then Mr. Orr, Bruce Orr, answers you and says, "Right." So just again to reiterate, when I spoke with the FBI, I told them my wife was working for Fusion GPS. I told them Fusion GPS was doing research on Donald Trump. You know, I don't know. I know if I use the term opposition research, but certainly that was what I tried to convey to them. So explain this exchange and what you got from it.
Well, remember, Bruce Orr is the number 4 person at the Department of Justice at the time. And why this is important, Maria, is, you know, what we've been hearing from Jim Himes and from Adam Schiff and, frankly, from the FBI and the Department of Justice was that the FBI and the Department of Justice really didn't know much about the Steele dossier until much, much later in the fall of 2016. Bruce Orr said under oath that before the Russia investigation was ever opened on July 30th, 2016, he sat down with Christopher Steele. He knew that Christopher Steele had put together this dossier at the direction of Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. He knew that Christopher Steele was biased and determined to stop Donald Trump, and that's why he wasn't willing to vouch for the credibility or the reliability of Christopher Steele in the dossier. And we know that he told that to the number 2 person at the FBI, Andy McCabe, then Lisa Page, then Peter Strzok, then Andrew Weissman, most of whom ended up on Bob Mueller's special counsel team. So again, all of this flies in the face, most importantly, of what was submitted to the FISA court months later. None of this was revealed.
Yeah.
None of this was disclosed. And that's why it's so significant.
And yet, the first hearings of the House Democrats that is coming up, they are bringing the witness to the floor, Michael Cohen. And that's going to happen when? When is this that testimony happening, sir?
February 7th.
Okay. So they are looking at something different than what we are getting from these documents in terms of who said what and knew what, when, and the malfeasance at the top of the FBI.
Yeah, well, you know, you have to ask yourself, if you're interested in finding the truth, would the first witness that you bring in be someone to testify to Congress right before he goes to prison for testifying to Congress untruthfully? That's not where I would go.
Okay. I want to ask you where you would go. We're going to take a short break because I know that you have some ideas in terms of peeling back the onion even more. And then I've got to get your take on the Bill Barr hearings, the William Barr hearings last week, in terms of whether or not the incoming AG will be following the truth and seeking the truth in this regard.